Hey everybody, this is Gregory from Dapp University, and today I have another guest on the channel. I've got Viktor here from Trust Wallet to give us a tour of his project and give you an idea of how you might build an Ethereum wallet. So, welcome Viktor to the channel.
Hey, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. My name is Victor and I'm working on Trust Wallet.
It's great to have you, Viktor. So before we jump into giving the tour of your project, do you want to kind of just give the people watching an elevator pitch for what you're working on at Trust Wallet in case they're not familiar?
Yeah, I think in summary, I would call it like MetaMask for mobile, but in general, this is basically your ERC20 wallet with all the collectibles and that browser. So I think pretty much all the components that you need to interact with the blockchain at the moment in Ethereum.
Very cool. Yeah, so Trust is an awesome project, and I'm super excited to have Viktor on here today because Trust is an open source project, and Viktor's kind enough to give us a bird's eye view of some of the code in Trust. So yeah, Viktor, do you want to kind of jump in and give us a tour?
Yeah, totally. So I think I want to share an example how we develop the iOS app. So we've done everything natively in Swift. And then Android app currently closed source just because there was too many scammers and we couldn't handle like all the reports that we were getting from users. But we'll plan to open source that too at some point. But at the moment, I'll show you example how everything is done with Swift and how like all the pieces are working to build an app for everyone to use in the world, right? Because that requires many things like localization, make sure you follow all the standards and guidelines.
So what's the first thing you'd like for us to see today, Viktor?
Yeah, I think everything starts with a GitHub, right? That's where all the code is stored. And then everyone who comes in as a developer and knows a little bit of Swift, they could come in and learn about like architecture, how we designed it, like what libraries we use to make it work with like Ethereum network. So I'll start with like showing an example. Like this is our open source iOS app that you can find on GitHub. So you just go to trustwallet/trustwallet iOS. And so it's pretty easy to get started. I think you just download the Xcode, the latest version, and then you just make one command, make bootstrap. That's going to install all the libraries that you need to use for the app. In order to use the project, we also build a few libraries that helps you to manage all the key management and just like core libraries. I will show you those. So we have Trust Core. Trust Core is a library that helps you to interact with like different data structures and algorithms that's required for the Ethereum network. And also Trust Key Store library, which is do all the managing for different wallets. It has support for private keys, key store JSON, and mnemonic phrase. So wanted to split that into separate components because not everyone needs to have all the libraries in one place. So we just wanted to be super simple and small. So this is all managed by like open source community, and that's been pretty well. Yeah, so if we go back to our iOS repo, you'll see there's a few tools that we had to build. So it's not just like iOS project, right? There's a few tools that we built to automate the process. So one of them is like a fast lane, right? Fast lane tool allows us to do shipment to the App Store every 4 or 5 days. So we just run one command to say like fast lane release, and that's gonna do many actions. So it's going to like take all the screenshots, it's going to do localization, it's going to do the signing, push notifications, like lots of sort of things that we need to run. And then like the whole code base stored pretty much in this library. So we try to split it into small components so it's really easy for the users to know like what's happening in each. So if we go to like, for example, browser, right? So this is our Web3 Dapp browser you can use to interact with the blockchain. So on our side, we split everything like in small folders that will give you an idea what it is. So there's like view controllers, view models, and you can see exactly how that's being done. So this is like a view model for history feature. Yeah. What else? Oh, I'll show you an example how localization works for Trust. Since we have lots of users coming from Japan, Russia, or like Great Britain, we need to make sure that those languages optimized for them. Otherwise, people wouldn't know like what it is, right? Like wallets and all those sort of things. Especially if you deal with wallets and you don't want to say things in English But for some people who don't really know English, they wouldn't understand like what the backup is and how to use it. So we wanted to make sure that that's all clear to them. And so we get in touch with community and ask them to do localizations. That's actually pretty easy to join. So if you go to our project and on the bottom, there's going to be a link. Since it's like also open source in a way, you can actually come to this link and see that here's all the languages that's supported on Trust at the moment. So there's like around like 12 of them. And so anyone who comes in, will give them permissions to do it. And then once you have the permissions, you can actually come into the project and then do localization. And it's actually pretty easy. So if you think about it, you just come in and it says like, okay, here's all the keywords that you need to translate. And then like you just press on this in here, and it's gonna like give you different alternatives from different languages. So you basically look at this and was like, okay, yeah, I think that's actually makes sense. So I'm gonna actually use that. So that allows you to actually implement things faster. So you don't need to actually type every word every time. So this tool basically helps us to do localization. And ideally, we want to support every possible language in the world. So anyone who wants to own crypto, they just come in and it feels so natural to them. And that's something we're trying to look, right? If there is a growth in some specific market, we try to actually optimize for that market too, right? That's actually great. And at the same time, we have different Telegram groups, one for like Japanese people, one for Spanish, and we try to actually have people moderating those channels because not everyone knows English, so that's really important. I'm originally from Ukraine, so my native language is Russian and Ukrainian, so it's kind of hard if you didn't study English to understand like what people are talking about. Yeah. Yet, let me actually show you some examples on how do we do testing with the app itself. Like once you have the project, I'll show you how that works. So iOS projects usually start with a file called app delegate. That's where all the logic starts to basically start with the flow, and then you like pick different coordinators to tell like, oh, go here or there. So we use simulators that's done with the Xcode. Now you can actually pick any simulator you want to test. You can pick like iPhone X, iPhone SE. That gives you an idea like how it's going to look on specific device since it has different sizing. I think there's a big difference between iPad and iPhone. So this is how it looks when we do testing. So we pretty much have like two devices on the screen, and then we could basically see how the layout is going to look. So we're like working currently on a new feature for the collectible. So it's going to be all done this way, and then you can just like press and see what will collectible look like. So this is what I told about like different feature. So I think like we're focused currently on doing ERC20 tokens, then collectibles. And then like all the code that you want to see, it's all done on different coordinators. So let's see, we want to see tokens coordinator. So it will give you an idea how the structure is, how the project is structured. So I don't think we can go too much into like details on how everything is working, but at least the user will have an idea who are familiar with the Swift projects.
So I'm interested in seeing how you turn, your mobile app into a Dapp browser. What libraries are you using to connect to the blockchain, and how are you pulling that into your app?
So currently, in order to build Dapp, you need to actually optimize it for MetaMask in a way, right? Because like all the developers, they use computers to develop. So I think I always suggest to use MetaMask for developing your Dapp, and then it's going to be optimized for mobile browsers too. So as long as you use Web3, it should work as normal. So I think like there is a few examples of dApps, and one of them is like Peepeth. So have you signed up on this one already? Oh, perfect. So I think this is one of the dApps that I use on a daily basis, and I think in order to build such Dapp, you need to just learn how to develop Web3 dApps. And I think, yeah, like there's a few things that I'm trying to push. Actually, we're working on native implementation for deep linking that will allow us to build native dApps and then connect them to the trust. And that's really critical because if you wanted to build native Dapp on iOS or Android, you would need to implement the whole ecosystem for like managing wallets, tokens, signing transaction messages, and there's so many things to care about. So I think what we want to do, we want to develop an SDK that allows you to build native Dapp and then just like interact with the SDK and not to do any signing. It will do signing with an app like Trust or any other ones that will come out to support deep linking. And that's something we're going to be optimizing in the next couple of months. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I wonder like what else to show. Yeah, you have any ideas?
Sure. I'd be interested in seeing, more info on things like how you're signing transactions.
Oh yeah, so there's a few things, right? So the way we do security at Trust is that like everything's stored on the phone, right? So in that sense, everything is decentralized because every phone has their own storage for the private key, and so there is no way to basically attack our server and says, okay, we're going to steal all the private keys because we don't have anything on the server, not a like single private data because we don't want to handle it, and we feel pretty comfortable because user handles it, right? So we have a class which called Ether. What is it even called? Ether keystar. So this file allows us to do signing. So there's a few things. We have a folder on the file system which stores the private keys. And those private keys encrypted with a password that stores the keychain. So, and then we also have data protection on those files, which means it's pretty hard to actually get into your phone and steal the private keys because it's already encrypted on the OS level by the iPhone or Android. And then if you wanted to sign the message or the transaction, you would go to sign transaction file. Yeah, so we have a method that takes the model which called sign transaction, and that contains information about the value you want to sign, the account you're trying to sign with, and then you would need to specify all the details about each transaction in order to sign it, right? And that's really important because before we do sign any transactions on the mobile phone, we tell the user, okay, here's like the amount you want to send, you need to confirm to it, and then we allow user to modify all the gas price or the gas limit information because some smart contracts require like some specific data to be set. And that's something we do in UI. And once you have this model structured, then you can call this function and we'll sign it based on the data you're going to provide it. And there's ERLP encoding that happens to convert it into a specific format. So once that's signed and we take the signed transaction hash, not a hash, it's like the content, we'll send it to the blockchain and then miners would broadcast it to other nodes. And once it got confirmed, users see the confirmed transaction in their UI.
Do you have any features of Trust that you're most proud of?
I think the biggest feature that we wanted to build to the community, I think, is actually, all right, I'll show you. It's called Automagically. So if you go to the bottom of the screen, you will see that tokens will appear automatically. I think that's something we wanted to do to the users, and I'll show you how that's being done. So we use open source library for that we built because there's nothing else that's open source. You can imagine this as Etherscan for Ethereum, but Etherscan is not open source, so we couldn't actually use it. So in order to show the tokens, because I have around like 95 tokens, imagine that I would need to add every token that I know like manually. That would like suck. And the way to do it is basically pressing like plus over here, and then you need to fill out all the information like contract address, name. That's going to be all auto-populated once you put the contract address, and we'll just fetch from the blockchain. But I think we wanted to make it so users don't need to ever input any smart contract addresses. And once they come in, they just see all the tokens that they have on their wallet. So the way we do it is we parse the whole blockchain, and then we do association if user had any transfer to their wallets, like as in or out. So this is the library we use. It's called TrustRay. And there's a few functionalities we built. In order to send push notification to the user about oncoming transfer or ERC20 transfer, we had to parse the blockchain. We had to look at all the events that generated by specific smart contract. And once we see that, first of all, we're going to store into the blockchain and say, okay, this user had this token. So then we can actually automatically show it. And then at the same time, we need to send them push notification and says, okay, you received 20 tokens or you sent some, right? And that's kind of limited at the moment with Ethereum blockchain because there is things that it requires you to have a centralized service like Trust to manage all the device tokens that going to be associated with Apple servers. So in order to send push notification, we need to get approval from the user first. And then once we get the device token, we're able to push notification them. Yeah, so this is actually a pretty good library to start with if you wanted to learn about like how do you parse the whole blockchain, how do you like structure data. And so if anyone up for learning, that's the best way to start it. And we have all the code in here.
I was actually just talking with another guest I had on the channel previously about some woes they were having with caching data from the blockchain versus just reading it directly, and I'd be interested to hear more about how you're doing that with this library.
Yeah, so I think the way library works is that like it started with the block one, right? So we start with the block one, and then we go forward and try to parse all the transactions. So we come to the first transaction that we find, and then we look at the data, right? If there is no data, that means it's just regular Ether transfer. So we're just going to store it as the regular transaction. So if there is any data in it, we'll try to look for the events that contains in the transaction. So we find this is like ERC20 transfer, that's where we'll start to do parsing. And so once we do start parsing, we'll define like, oh, this is the type of transaction we need to handle. Because there is also ERC 721 standard that allows you to have collectibles. So that's something we want to handle soon. So when you actually do send a CryptoKitty, we can actually say, oh, you send this CryptoKitty number 26, right? So we can actually present it into the UI. So this one is a little bit tricky, but we try to improve it for the users.
So where does the data live after it's parsed?
Yeah, so the data live in the MongoDB. Currently, I don't think it's the best actually DB for this specific data. But that was the easiest for us to actually get started. And there is actually information how to set it up. Like as you can probably see, we use MongoDB, and that's how you set the configuration for it. Yeah, and that's the only library that you need, not the library, the database that you need to handle. That requires to actually have really powerful servers. So we have around like 200 to 56 gigabyte of RAM in order to keep all the indices and do lookup fast.
So what technology is this API built in?
So it's built in Node.js, and we are using TypeScript to compile it. I think it's pretty cool to use TypeScript. This is my first time using TypeScript in general, so I was really surprised how good it is, even though it requires you to do lots of models that tells you like, oh, here's how it's going to look, and then you need to do conversions. So it's not as good as working with any static language like Swift, which makes it more, it gives you more ideas like how things should work.
So when you're pulling data in from the chain and parsing it and putting it into intermediate storage, are you connecting to your own Ethereum node at that point?
Yes, so we have around 7 different nodes for each network. So if you go to the settings of the app, you will see that we have around 8 different networks. So we support every network because we want all the users to like enjoy any type of Ethereum network. At the same time, we want to make sure that developers have access for testing, right? So if you use Colvin or Rops, then you can easily see all the transactions, and it makes it easier for you to manage all the things, right? So if you're doing a token contract, you can actually see like how your token is going to show up on the user interface, and you can test the transfers and all the features.
What are you using to host your nodes?
So we host everything on Heroku, and we have also a button that says like deploy to Heroku. Anyone who would like to have their own node, which will require lots of resources, but you can try it. So you can deploy it and use it. And this API is actually public. So we have documentation for it hosted under, Wiki. And so there is maybe like 4 different endpoints that we expose. So one of them is getting transactions. So as long as you pass address, we can actually tell you like, oh, here's all the transactions that's associated with your address.
Now, is this API something that could be used for, web applications that might need to get cached data from the blockchain?
Yeah, exactly. So some people are already using that for. So I think there's one Dapp that's pulling all the tokens. So it allows you to send multiple transfers in one transactions. And so that Dapp will go and fetch all the tokens that's on your account, and they will say like, oh, which token do you want to send? It will like prepend it to you. So anyone who would like to use it, just come to this repo and you'll find information about how that works. We show all the examples. At the same time, we have a pricing endpoints. If you use CoinMarketCap, you will know that it doesn't provide you a smart contract address for a specific symbol. So we had this problem initially. Since there is lots of smart contracts with the same symbol, we would basically say, oh, give me information about Amigo, right? And if there is a second Amigo OMG token, it will return the wrong pricing. So we wanted to do the mapping, and it says like, okay, here's the smart contract address, and here's ID for the coin market ID. So in that case, we know exactly this is the pricing we're getting from. So, and we have like information how that works. And I think this is what we use for auto population. We pass the address that we need to get, and it returns all the information about all the tokens. But at the same time, as you can see, we provide the balance as well. But we wanted to architect our app so it will be decentralized. What it means is that if our server goes down, the app will work as expected, but you wouldn't see some really cool features as automatically populate these smart contract addresses. That's missing, but that's fine, right? Because you can add it manually if our nodes that will help you to kind of guide will be down, but you won't get any push notifications either. But I think we wanted to make it so it's more decentralized. And the only service we still rely on is Infura, which used by pretty much any Dapp, right? MetaMask use it and any other Dapps. So, but that's something to improve in the future as long as we have I think that improvement will come from Ethereum Foundation, where they will have better management for light clients. So once you start your phone, it's going to do light sync with the network. And then once you have that, you will be able to communicate with any smart contract out there.
And maybe just for clarification for people right now who may not quite understand that. So it would be ridiculous to try and run a full node on your mobile phone, right?
Yep.
So what you're talking about is a new implementation where you could run some sort of client that does not have to store all the data from the blockchain and does not need all the resources to do things like sign transactions, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think if you look at the numbers, currently the archive node is around like 1 terabyte of data. So you cannot even run the node on your computer anymore. So that would be pretty heavy. Like I have like iMac 27 is like pretty powerful, but my computer just freezing after some time. It won't be, and then it takes like at least 2 weeks to sync the node. Like this is crazy, right? But then there's a light sync, which allows you to do like small sync with the data. And that requires you at least 500 megabytes of data. But if you think about mobile and the whole world, I don't think there's many people who would be able to use so much data just to sync the initial load of the app. And then you would need to still syncing every time. So I think it won't work for the most people until we have like really fast solution to it. Because if you onboard just new users, you want to give them ability to just like kind of enjoy the product right away. But I think we can find the balance between using RPC nodes like Infura and at the same time do light sync at the same time, right? It depends what kind of security you want to choose. But at the moment, it's a trade-off. And for the most part, people just want to control their private key. As long as you provide control your private key, I think that's what matters, right? So this is like how we can distinguish decentralization, right? We could be fully decentralized, but at the same time, tech is not there, but we're trying to improve it. Oh yeah, another thing, so initially I started working on Trust around like 7 months ago, and my motivation was to build a wallet for ERC20 tokens because I couldn't find anything that was open source. The only one I found was IM Token, which is based in China, and the product was a little bit tricky to use. So that's the reason why I started. But then I realized that there's not many libraries that people actually open source. And one of them I wanted to open source is called Tokens. So this is a library for all the ERC20 tokens. So it has all the images for smart contracts. We have around like, how many? 40, I think we have 600 now token images. So all the token images that you see in here, they're actually coming from this library. So this is just a directory of all the ERC20 token images. And then imagine that you're like a small startup or you want to launch your own token coin. You can just add the token image in here. I have one on this network. I'll show you for the example. So if I go to PO network, you'll see that I have Viktor coin, and it has the custom token image. So that's how you define it. You just place it in token image, and then anyone could use this API. And here's the API. You just pass this URL and then smart contract address.png, and then you get the token image. So I think this is pretty cool because it's open source. Anyone could use it. And at the same time, we wanted to give this tutorial for users who don't know how to add it, or if you Google something like add ERC20 token to Trust, it will just come up how to do it.
Very cool.
So, and everyone contributes to it. So this is the best thing about open source, that actually it's not just you doing this, but it's actually everyone contributing to the same library. Yeah, this is the way we designed it, so we can support any type of network. Currently we support like POA, Callisto, Ethereum Classic, but at the same time, like those not being used as much as Ethereum. That's pretty much like 95%. But I'm gonna encourage everyone to build their own networks and find better consensus algorithms so we can actually improve the whole ecosystem, because transactions are expensive, they're slow, and if anyone knows how to do it better, like, that's the way we can add it.
So while we're here, is there anything that's exciting on the roadmap for Trust in 2018?
So one thing we wanted to improve is we want to give ability for any user to have their own name on the blockchain. So that's where ENS comes in. But there are some limitations we see, but we're trying to figure it out the best way to do it, right? So ENS is an amazing technology, but in order to create your own name, something that says Viktor, Viktor.ath, for example, I think it's too short, but what if you wanted to do it, right? So you need to wait for 3 days until the auction is over, and then you get your name on the blockchain. And then anyone could use Viktor.ath to send you a payment, right? But the limitation of this technology is that 3 days, it's not feasible for any regular user, because who's going to wait for that? And then the second one, you could register a domain, and then we could give users subdomains. So that's something we want to look into. We want to give identity on the blockchain, but it's going to be like fully anonymous, so you can just like provide the what you want to share. It's not going to be KYC based, which is too much, I think, in my opinion. I don't want to actually store any private information in the blockchain. I just want to create an identity and build reputation on top of it, but without providing my personal information. So that's something we want to be working on the next month or so, to give anyone ENS name. So it will be like, I don't know, app.viktor.ath, and then anyone could send you money, and that's going to be visible to all the users. Because currently, if you go to wallets, you'll see there is like 3 wallets, and they look all confusing because they have random names. But if you can make them more friendlier to the users, they will use it easier.
So I've seen different solutions out there for managing your name and associating it to whatever address you're using, right? But what you're talking about is a universally recognized standard, right?
Yep, exactly. So this is what's called ENS, right? It's Ethereum domain. Yep, service. Yeah, exactly. So I think we want to be standardized. So we don't want to create our own smart contract and store all the names and that just like specific to Trust, but we want to use the standards that are already there. And if you wanted to import your wallet to some other wallet, then you'll just see the same name, right? So that's really critical, to use standards, not come up with something new. Unless you want to create a standard because the previous one actually sucked. Yeah, that would be the reason only.
So if I understand this correctly, you guys just got a grant from the Ethereum Foundation, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I think so. Another thing we wanted to do, we want to improve key management for the Ethereum and the private key in general, because there's so many problems with private keys because they get stolen or lost, and people just forget about them for some reason. So I think want to just do more analytics around like how people actually lose their wallets and how do we improve it in general. So that would be our goal for the next like 3 months in general, to do more research, do some designs, and do iterations to improve this process.
Where can we find Trust Wallet? Do we just search for Trust Wallet in the App Store?
Yeah, pretty much. So if you just search App Store, Google Play, it will just come up there. Yeah, we try to do like search engine optimization as well. So if you type like ERC20 wallet on Google Play, it will just be first. Same thing for App Store. Yeah, I think it's really important to build the product that speaks by itself, right? So when you come and you just like download it and use it, that's something I wanted to do. I didn't want it to add lots of functionality, but I wanted to make it as simple as possible to use it.
Very cool. Yeah, and can we follow your project on social media anywhere?
Yeah, of course. I think anyone who wants to join us to contribute, feel free to join us on GitHub. We do talk on Discord about like different features we're working on. So I think it's great for like team communication. At the same time, we have Telegram channels and Twitter, Facebook, all of them.
So one more question. We'll do a closing question here, unless there's anything else you'd like for us to know. What do you think the future of this technology is, and do you have any like timelines for what that might look like in the next year or so?
That's a good question. I think we're gonna see more progress on mobile side, and that's where I'm trying to push at the moment. Like we need to build native dApps, right? Web dApps, they're like suck, and you cannot provide that amazing experience. Same thing with PPIP, right? You still need to use the browser in order to actually access, but I wanted to have standalone app where you can come in and see all the peeps, right? You're gonna see that experience. And so that's something I will be working on for the next like a year or so, like building all the SDKs that will allow anyone to build native dApps because it's all missing. And everyone is like focused on making QR codes and allow you to connect desktop into mobile. But I think we just need to put more forces into just developing mobile itself and then do deep linking internally, right? That's how Facebook works at the moment. If you wanted to connect, you want to log in with Facebook, you just like press a button, opens the app Facebook, you get the access token and then proceed later. So I think that's something we're working on. So I think zip linking, fully mobile. So I think that would be the biggest in this year. At the same time, based on that, there's going to be lots of games coming out, right? They're going to work with all the ERC20 standard, ERC721 standards that have you create these collectibles and then store it on the wallet. So I think those are looking pretty positive to me. And there is many teams that already tackling games on the blockchain.
Yeah, that's awesome, Victor. Well, I've really enjoyed our chat today. I've enjoyed this tour through the Trust Wallet project. So if there's anybody out there who's watching who would like to contribute, you now know the place to go and the man to talk to. So, Victor, again, always a pleasure. Everybody be sure to subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this one where I talk to people who are building on top of Ethereum. And be sure to download Trust Wallet and get rolling. And until next time, thanks for watching Dapp University.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me here, Friday. See you guys.